What if the creepiest horror films were not made with modern effects, loud shocks, or graphic scenes, but with shadows, silence, and things the camera refused to show? The 1940s produced nightmares that Hollywood has almost buried. Some look harmless until the lights go out. Then the footsteps begin, the walls feel closer, and every dark corner suddenly seems occupied. Before we enter these forgotten nightmares, please like this video, share it with another classic horror fan, and subscribe to our channel. Number 37. The Devil Bat, 1940. Behind the friendly smile of respected scientist Dr. Paul Carruthers hides a man boiling with resentment. He believes the wealthy Heath family became rich by stealing the success of inventions he created. Instead of confronting them directly, Carruthers develops an unusual revenge plan involving giant bats trained to attack a special scent. Bela Lugosi makes the strange idea work because he never treats Carruthers like a joke. His calm voice and cold stare suggest that the scientist has spent years rehearsing every detail. He gives members of the Heath family a specially prepared aftershave, politely wishes them good evening, and waits for his flying creation to find them. The most remembered sequence comes when one victim applies the lotion and steps outside. The night is quiet until enormous wings appear above him. The effect may look simple today, but the slow preparation creates genuine suspense. Meanwhile, a reporter begins connecting the attacks to Carruthers. That investigation turns the laboratory into the center of a deadly game. What remains unsettling is not the oversized bat. It is Carruthers smiling warmly at people whom he already knows will not survive the night. Number 36. The Ape, 1940. At first, Dr. Bernard Adrian appears to be a dedicated physician, desperately trying to cure a young woman who cannot walk. His experiments require human spinal fluid, however, and his determination slowly crosses every moral boundary. When a traveling circus ape escapes and causes panic, Adrian kills the animal and uses its skin as a disguise. Wearing the costume, he roams through the darkness, attacking people whose spinal fluid he needs for his research. Boris Karloff plays the doctor as both sympathetic and frightening. Adrian genuinely wants his patient to recover, but he has convinced himself that any action is acceptable if the final result appears noble. One of the film's eeriest moments shows the supposed ape moving outside a victim's home. The creature does not behave like a wild animal. It watches, waits, and chooses exactly when to strike, revealing the intelligence hidden beneath the fur. As suspicion spreads through town, Adrian continues his treatments while pretending to be horrified by the attacks. The story becomes less about an escaped animal and more about a respected man hiding inside a monster. The costume may seem basic, but Karloff's performance gives the film an uncomfortable question. How much cruelty can someone excuse by calling it science? Please subscribe if you enjoy discovering classic horror films that rarely appear on modern lists. And tell us in the comments which forgotten film has frightened you the most so far. Number 35. Man-Made Monster, 1941. A terrible electrical accident leaves carnival worker Dan McCormick as the only survivor, attracting the attention of scientist Dr. John Lawrence and his ambitious assistant, Dr. Paul Regas. Lawrence wants to study Dan's unusual resistance to electricity. Regas sees something far more dangerous: the opportunity to create a living weapon. Repeated experiments fill Dan's body with electrical energy. His personality disappears. His skin begins to glow, and Regas gains control over him using specialized equipment. Lon Chaney Jr. plays Dan as an ordinary, good-natured man slowly erased by someone else's obsession. The famous transformation scenes show Dan wearing a dark protective suit, while light surrounds his face and hands. He walks through electrical barriers that would stop any normal person, appearing less like a man and more like a machine carrying a human memory. Regas eventually sends him out to settle personal scores. Dan follows instructions without understanding the destruction he causes, making him another tragic monster created by science rather than born evil. What makes the film creepy is the loss of free will. Dan remains physically alive, but another person controls his movements, thoughts, and growing power. The electrical effects are old-fashioned, yet the idea of becoming trapped inside your own body remains disturbing. Number 34. The Monster and the Girl, 1941. A courtroom opens this unusual nightmare with Scott Webster being sentenced for a crime arranged by powerful racketeers. His sister Susan tried to save him, but the criminals manipulated events and destroyed both their lives. After Scott's execution, a scientist secretly places his brain inside the body of a gorilla. The creature escapes and begins hunting the men responsible for Scott's downfall. Each attack feels strangely organized. This is not an animal acting from instinct. It remembers faces, understands guilt, and follows a human list of enemies. One of the film's strongest sequences shows the gorilla watching Susan from the shadows. Instead of attacking her, it reacts with recognition and sadness. For a brief moment, the monster is clearly still her brother, unable to speak or explain what has happened. The gorilla then moves through the city at night, finding the racketeers one by one. Police believe they are chasing an escaped animal, never realizing that a dead man's anger is guiding it. The concept sounds wild, but the emotional center is unexpectedly dark. Scott has returned, yet he cannot reclaim his name, his body, or his sister. He can only complete his revenge before the authorities destroy the creature carrying what remains of him. Number 33. Night Monster, 1942. Something is moving across the grounds of an isolated mansion, leaving strange marks and terrified witnesses behind. Inside the house lives Kurt Ingston, a wealthy man whose body was left paralyzed after unsuccessful medical treatment. Ingston invites the 3 doctors who failed him to visit the estate. Also present are a psychologist, a mysterious spiritual teacher, nervous servants, and people who seem to know more than they admit. Then the guests begin disappearing. The mansion is filled with locked doors, foggy gardens, hidden resentment, and the sound of someone approaching before anything can be seen. Bela Lugosi appears as the butler, but the real threat remains carefully concealed. A particularly effective scene involves the spiritualist Aghor Singh demonstrating strange mental abilities before the assembled guests. The display creates the possibility that forces beyond ordinary science are operating inside the house. As the doctors are targeted, suspicion moves from room to room. Ingston appears helpless, yet his bitterness makes everyone uneasy. The final explanation is elaborate, but the film's atmosphere remains its greatest weapon. Watching alone, it is easy to imagine the mansion continuing beyond the edge of the screen, with another corridor, another locked room, and something wet crossing the floor just outside the light. Number 32. The Mad Monster, 1942. Hidden inside a remote laboratory, Dr. Lorenzo Cameron believes he can transform an ordinary human being into a powerful wolf-like creature. His chosen subject is Petro, his simple and loyal gardener, who has no understanding of what the experiments will do to him. Cameron injects Petro with wolf blood, causing his posture, face, and behavior to change. The scientist then sends him after former colleagues who mocked his research and ruined his professional reputation. The laboratory transformation is the film's defining scene. Petro struggles as animal instinct takes control, while Cameron watches with satisfaction instead of concern. The doctor sees proof of his genius, where everyone else would see a human life being destroyed. During each attack, Petro becomes both hunter and victim. He has little control over the creature Cameron has created, and afterward he cannot fully understand what happened. George Zucco gives Cameron an almost theatrical madness, talking to imaginary figures of the scientists he hates. Eventually, a reporter and Cameron's daughter begin uncovering the truth. That brings the monster back toward the laboratory where it was born. The film is inexpensive and sometimes exaggerated, but its central idea remains grim. An educated man deliberately turns someone who trusts him into an experiment, then calls the suffering a scientific victory. Number 31. Dr. Renault's Secret, 1942. A storm forces young Larry Forbes to spend the night at an isolated French inn while traveling to meet the family of his fiancée. Before morning, a man is found dead, and the local residents behave as though violence is something they have learned not to question. At the nearby Renault estate, Larry meets Dr. Renault and his quiet servant Noel. Something about Noel feels wrong. He watches people with intense curiosity, struggles with normal social behavior, and reacts violently when threatened. The truth is that Renault has performed a horrifying experiment, transforming an ape into a man. Noel may wear clothing and speak, but the doctor has never given him a real place in human society. He is treated like property, servant, and scientific proof all at once. One of the creepiest scenes shows Noel becoming fascinated with Renault's daughter. His attention appears almost innocent until jealousy and instinct begin fighting beneath his controlled appearance. As Larry investigates the murders, the peaceful estate becomes increasingly dangerous. Renault tries to protect his work, while Noel begins understanding how completely he has been used. The horror does not come from Noel's origin alone. It comes from watching him realize that the man he sees as a father considers him nothing more than a successful experiment. Number 30. The Mummy's Tomb, 1942. 30 years after the events of The Mummy's Hand, surviving archaeologists Steve Banning and Babe Jensen have returned home, believing the curse of Kharis is finished. They are wrong. A new Egyptian guardian travels to America, carrying the mummy and the sacred tanna leaves needed to revive him. Under cover of darkness, Karis walks through a quiet New England town, hunting the people who disturbed Princess Ananka's tomb. The most frightening image is not a sudden attack. It is Karis, moving slowly toward a house, while everyone inside remains unaware. His dragging walk suggests that escape should be easy, yet the darkness, narrow rooms, and shock of seeing him make resistance almost impossible. When the older heroes from the previous film are targeted, the story becomes surprisingly bleak. Time has passed, families have grown, but an ancient act has followed them across decades and continents. The townspeople eventually form a search party, carrying torches, creating images that recall Universal's Frankenstein films. Still, Karis continues pursuing his victims with mechanical patience. The film transformed the mummy from a romantic ancient figure into a relentless nighttime stalker. He does not hurry, explain, or negotiate. He simply appears outside the window and keeps coming until the past has collected another debt. Number 29. The Mad Ghoul, 1943. College professor Dr. Alfred Morris discovers an ancient gas capable of placing a person into a death-like state. Instead of approaching the discovery carefully, he secretly tests it on his student, Ted Allison. Ted becomes an obedient, pale-faced servant who requires fluid taken from human hearts to remain alive. Under Morris's control, he enters cemeteries at night, opens fresh graves, and retrieves what the professor needs. The cemetery scenes give the film its strongest horror. Ted walks between headstones carrying tools, unable to resist the commands inside his damaged mind. When he briefly returns to normal, he remembers only fragments and cannot understand why fear follows him everywhere. Morris also manipulates Ted's feelings for singer Isabel Lewis, using jealousy to maintain control. Ted becomes trapped between his former personality and the ghoul created through repeated exposure to the gas. A reporter investigating disturbed graves slowly connects the crimes to Morris's experiments. By then, the professor is more interested in protecting his discovery than saving his student. The film's title promises a monster, but Ted is never the true villain. He is a young man poisoned, controlled, and forced to violate the dead. The professor watching calmly from the shadows is far more frightening than the ghoul carrying out his orders. Number 28. The Return of the Vampire, 1943. During the First World War, vampire Armand Tesla is discovered feeding on victims inside a London cemetery. A doctor and her assistant stop him by driving a stake through his heart, while his werewolf servant is released from supernatural control. More than 20 years later, a German bombing raid damages the cemetery. 2 workers find Tesla's body, mistake the stake for bomb debris, and remove it. The vampire rises during another war, returning to a city already surrounded by darkness, destruction, and fear. One unforgettable sequence shows Tesla emerging through the fog while air raid sirens echo across London. The supernatural threat blends with wartime danger, making the streets appear unsafe from both humans and monsters. Bela Lugosi plays Tesla with controlled anger. Rather than repeat Dracula exactly, he presents a vampire who understands the modern world and uses the confusion of the Blitz to hide his movements. His former werewolf servant falls under his influence again, becoming a tragic weapon. Tesla then targets the family of the woman who defeated him decades earlier. The idea of an old evil awakened by falling bombs gives the film its special atmosphere. London has prepared for enemy aircraft, fires, and collapsing buildings, but no defense plan includes a vampire walking out of a broken grave. Number 27. Weird Woman, 1944. What begins as an unusual marriage slowly becomes a battle over whether superstition is foolish or the only thing keeping someone alive. Sociology professor Norman Reed returns from a tropical island with a new wife named Paula. She deeply believes in charms, protective rituals, and invisible forces. Norman considers her beliefs harmless until he discovers that she has secretly surrounded him with objects meant to protect his career. Embarrassed, he destroys them and demands that she abandon her practices. Almost immediately, his life begins collapsing. A student accuses him of misconduct, a vehicle nearly strikes him, his academic reputation is threatened, and a colleague turns against him. Norman insists that every event has a reasonable explanation, but Paula becomes convinced that removing the charms opened the door to disaster. The famous atmosphere comes from the film's inner sanctum style. It begins with a floating human head inside a crystal ball, warning viewers that the mind can create monsters, and perhaps even commit terrible acts without knowing it. Behind Norman's troubles is a woman who understands Paula's fears and uses them as weapons. She does not need real magic. She only needs Paula and Norman to doubt each other. That is where the film becomes unsettling. Whether the supernatural exists almost stops mattering. Belief alone influences every decision, and once fear enters the marriage, ordinary coincidences begin looking like proof that something unseen is closing in. Number 26. Cry of the Werewolf, 1944. Inside a New Orleans museum devoted to the occult, strange exhibits describe legends that most visitors treat as entertainment. The museum's director does not. He believes the stories surrounding the Latour family and its connection to werewolves may be true. A hidden chamber contains evidence linked to Marie Latour, a supposed werewolf queen. When the director enters the room, he encounters Celeste, a mysterious woman determined to protect the family's secrets. Soon he is found dead. Celeste is not shown through heavy monster makeup. The film often uses a real wolf, shadows, and suggestion, borrowing the quieter approach that made Cat People effective. Nina Foch gives Celeste an elegant sadness, making her seem trapped by the curse rather than excited by it. One memorable scene follows characters through secret passages beneath the museum. Narrow walls, hidden doors, and distant animal sounds turn the building into a maze where history is still alive. The director's son begins investigating with Elsa, a woman connected to the museum. Their search draws them toward a community that has protected the Latour bloodline for generations. The film's horror comes from inheritance. Celeste did not choose what she becomes, yet she will deceive or destroy anyone who threatens the secret. Watching alone, every ordinary animal sound outside the window begins carrying the same question: was that really just a dog? Number 25. The Mummy's Ghost, 1944. A professor in the small town of Mapleton accidentally awakens Karis while experimenting with the legendary Tana leaves. At the same time, Egyptian priest Yusuf Bey arrives in America with orders to recover both Karis and the reincarnated soul of Princess Ananka. That soul now exists inside Amina Mansouri, a young woman who has no idea why Egyptian music, ancient objects, and certain locations affect her so deeply. As Karis moves closer, Amina's appearance begins changing. Her hair develops a white streak, her energy fades, and another identity seems to rise inside her. The film's most memorable scene occurs when Karis finds Amina and carries her away while townspeople follow. She is frightened, yet she also appears drawn toward him by a memory belonging to someone who lived centuries earlier. Unlike many monster sequels, this one ends without offering easy comfort. Amina is taken into the swamp, where age suddenly overtakes her as the spirit of Ananka fully emerges. Karis carries her deeper into the water, while rescuers arrive too late. The downbeat ending gives the film a power its modest budget cannot hide. The young heroine does not simply escape the curse because she is innocent. Her present life is swallowed by an ancient story that began before she was born. That final walk into the swamp remains one of Universal horror's strangest and saddest images. Number 24. The Brighton Strangler, 1945. On stage, actor Reginald Parker plays a calculating killer known as the Brighton Strangler. Night after night, he repeats the character's voice, movements, and methods before applauding audiences. During a German air raid, a bomb destroys the theater and injures Reginald. When he regains consciousness among the ruins, his memory has disappeared. The only identity remaining inside his mind is the fictional killer he was portraying. He walks into wartime London believing the Strangler is real and that unfinished victims are waiting for him. The city's blackouts provide perfect cover. Streets are dark. Residents are distracted by air raid warnings, and damaged buildings make his confused appearance seem ordinary. A chilling sequence shows Reginald repeating part of his stage performance in a real setting. The gestures once recognized as entertainment now lead toward an actual crime. Because he remains calm and polite, the people around him do not immediately recognize the danger. Meanwhile, those who knew the actor believe he died in the bombing. His fiancée and friends have no reason to search for him until details from the fictional play begin appearing in police reports. The horror lies in the collapse between performance and identity. Reginald is not pretending anymore. A character created to frighten theater audiences has survived the destruction of the theater and walked into the real world wearing its actor's body. Number 23. The Undying Monster, 1942. For generations, members of the Hammond family have feared an old curse connected to their isolated English estate. According to local legend, something animal-like appears during certain nights and attacks anyone carrying the Hammond bloodline. When Oliver Hammond is discovered injured and another person is found dead, Scotland Yard investigator Robert Curtis arrives with his scientific assistant. Curtis refuses to accept supernatural explanations, even when strange footprints, torn clothing, and family records suggest that the curse may be real. The mansion's atmosphere does most of the frightening work. Wind presses against the windows, servants speak in lowered voices, and every hallway seems to preserve knowledge that outsiders are not meant to uncover. One of the best scenes takes place during an examination of the attack site. The evidence appears to point toward an animal, yet certain details suggest human planning. The uncertainty forces viewers to consider several possibilities at once: a family conspiracy, mental illness, or an actual creature. Oliver's sister Helga becomes increasingly vulnerable as the investigation continues. The family's history is gradually uncovered through documents and chemical evidence, leading Curtis toward an explanation involving inherited transformation. The final revelations lean towards science, but the film never loses its gothic mood. Its monster is frightening because it is tied to blood and family. The Hammonds cannot sell the house, leave the country, or lock the doors against something they may already carry inside themselves. Even after the mystery is explained, the lonely estate still feels cursed. Number 22. Son of Dracula, 1943. A wealthy Louisiana family welcomes the mysterious Count Alucard, a European nobleman invited by young heiress Catherine Caldwell. Her relatives find the visitor cold and unsettling, but Catherine appears fascinated by him. The Count's name is Dracula written backwards, a clue that seems obvious today but works within the film's dreamlike southern setting. Fog covers the swamps, strange lights move across the water, and Alucard arrives without traveling by ordinary road. The most famous image shows his coffin gliding silently across the swamp, while mist curls around it. No horses pull it, and no servant guides it. The coffin simply moves toward the estate, as though the landscape itself is carrying the vampire. Catherine secretly marries Alucard, but her reasons are more complicated than romance. She believes vampirism will give her eternal life, and plans to share that existence with her former fiancé, Frank Stanley. Alucard, however, has no intention of becoming part of her plan. After Catherine is apparently killed, Frank discovers that she still moves after dark. The film turns into a tragic struggle involving jealousy, manipulation, and the destruction of Alucard's resting place. Lon Chaney Jr. may seem unusually heavy and physical for Dracula, yet that gives his vampire a different presence. He does not float through drawing rooms like a charming guest. He stands like an intruder who has already decided the house belongs to him. Number 21. The Ghost Ship, 1943. Fresh from maritime school, Tom Merriam joins the cargo vessel Altair as third officer. He admires Captain Will Stone, whose quiet authority initially seems to represent everything a young officer should become. That admiration changes when Merriam begins noticing disturbing behavior. Stone allows dangerous situations to develop, manipulates the crew, and treats the ship as a private kingdom where his decisions cannot be questioned. When a sailor dies under suspicious circumstances, Merriam becomes convinced that the captain deliberately caused it. No one believes him. The ship's crew has depended on Stone for years, and Merriam has little proof. Every attempt to warn others makes him appear unstable. The ocean closes around them, removing courts, police, and any authority beyond the captain himself. One unforgettable sequence traps a crewman inside a chain locker while massive lengths of chain pour down around him. The accident appears possible, but Stone's cold reaction suggests something more deliberate. The sound of metal crashing into the enclosed space becomes more frightening than any visible monster. A mute sailor observes much of the story and understands the danger. Yet his inability to speak mirrors Merriam's helplessness. Both men know what Stone is becoming, but neither can make the crew listen. The climax turns the darkened ship into a floating prison as the captain hunts Merriam. There are no ghosts in the usual sense. The title refers to a vessel haunted by fear, obedience, and the knowledge that its commander has absolute power until someone stops him. Number 20. The Curse of the Cat People, 1944. Rather than repeating the original film's panther attacks, this strange sequel enters the lonely imagination of a child. Amy Reed is the daughter of Oliver and Alice, the surviving couple from Cat People. She struggles to make friends and prefers stories, gardens, and invisible companions to ordinary childhood games. After finding a photograph of Oliver's late first wife, Irena, Amy imagines her as a gentle playmate. To Amy, Irena is not the dangerous woman her father remembers. She is calm, understanding, and always ready to appear when the real world becomes cruel. One of the film's eeriest sequences takes place in the garden during winter. Amy speaks with Irina beneath bare trees, while snow falls quietly around them. Nothing openly frightening happens, yet the scene raises an uncomfortable question. Is Amy inventing Irina, or has the dead woman truly returned? Nearby lives an aging actress who tells elaborate stories and refuses to recognize her own daughter. Amy becomes caught between the woman's fantasy world and the daughter's growing resentment. Oliver reacts harshly to Amy's imagination because he fears the return of Irina's influence. His attempts to force Amy into normal behavior only make her more isolated. The climax unfolds during a snowstorm, when fantasy and physical danger finally meet. Irina's presence may save Amy, but the film never gives a simple answer. Its horror is soft, almost beautiful. It understands that an imaginary friend can be comforting, while still leaving open the possibility that someone dead is standing just beyond the garden gate. Number 19. The Amazing Mr. X, 1948. Grieving widow Christine Faber has never fully accepted the death of her husband. One evening on a lonely beach, she hears his voice calling through the darkness. Soon afterward, she meets Alexis, a mysterious spiritualist who seems to know details about her life that no stranger should possess. Alexis presents himself as a bridge between the living and the dead. During seances, curtains move, candles flicker, voices emerge from darkness, and Christine becomes convinced that her husband is trying to contact her. The film initially reveals that many of Alexis's effects are tricks. Hidden equipment, secret assistance, and carefully gathered information allow him to control vulnerable clients. Yet the story refuses to remain a simple exposure of fraud. The seance sequences are beautifully shadowed. Faces float in darkness, while Christine waits for the voice she desperately wants to hear. The room seems empty, but small movements at the edge of the frame create the feeling that someone else has entered. Alexis begins losing control when Christine's situation becomes connected to a more dangerous scheme. Events occur that even he cannot easily explain. A man who has spent years manufacturing ghosts suddenly confronts the possibility that the dead may answer without his assistance. The film mixes supernatural horror with noir, romance, and deception. Its most disturbing idea is how easily grief can be used as an open door. Christine wants one more conversation with her husband so badly that she ignores every warning. By the time she understands the trap, the voice from the darkness no longer sounds comforting. Number 18. The Red House, 1947. Deep inside Oxhead Woods stands an abandoned red farmhouse that Pete Morgan has forbidden anyone to approach. Pete lives nearby with his sister Ellen and their adopted daughter Meg, maintaining the appearance of a quiet farming family. When Meg persuades Pete to hire her school friend Nath, the young man decides to take a shortcut through the woods. Pete reacts with sudden panic, warning him about screams, danger, and something terrible near the red house. Nath enters the forest anyway. Darkness falls, branches scrape against him, and strange sounds seem to follow his movements. The sequence plays like a supernatural attack, even though almost nothing is clearly shown. The woods themselves appear determined to turn him back. Pete's fear becomes increasingly violent whenever Meg or Nath asks about the property. He claims he is protecting them, but every warning reveals that the real danger may be his own memory. The young people continue investigating and discover evidence of a tragedy connected to Meg's childhood. Pete's warnings about the house are partly designed to hide the truth about her parents and his own role in what happened. Edward G. Robinson makes Pete frightening without turning him into a simple villain. His guilt has grown into obsession, and he treats the Forbidden Woods as though controlling the land can control the past. A particularly tense moment occurs when Meg hears a scream from the darkness and can no longer tell whether it is human, imagined, or deliberately created to frighten her. The final journey to the Red House strips away every false story. Yet even after the truth is known, the forest retains its power. The film makes childhood warnings feel dangerous. Never enter those woods, never ask about that house, and never assume the adults protecting you are telling the truth. Number 17. Daughter of Darkness, 1948. A quiet Irish village regards young Emmy Bodine with open suspicion. Her beauty attracts attention, but something cold in her manner makes people uncomfortable. After a troubling incident involving a man at a traveling fair, she is sent to work as a servant for an English family. The new household initially treats Emmy with kindness. She appears shy, obedient, and eager to begin again. Gradually, however, men who become interested in her face strange and deadly consequences. The film never needs a supernatural explanation. Emmy behaves like a figure from an old folk tale, arriving from a distant landscape and carrying destruction into an apparently respectable home. One of the most unsettling sequences involves the fairground strongman who recognizes Emmy after she has tried to escape her past. The bright entertainment around them contrasts with her expressionless fear. She knows that he remembers what happened in Ireland, and his presence threatens the identity she has created. Soon the English countryside becomes as threatening as the village she left. Barns, narrow paths, and isolated buildings provide places where attraction can turn into violence without witnesses. The family begins understanding that Emmy is not merely misunderstood. Yet the film also suggests that years of rejection and exploitation helped shape the person she became. Siobhan McKenna plays Emmy with very little visible emotion, which makes her difficult to read. She can appear vulnerable in one moment and completely detached in the next. The title sounds like a supernatural description, but her darkness may be entirely human. That makes the film harder to dismiss after it ends. There is no ancient curse to break and no creature to destroy. Only a damaged person who has learned that innocence is the safest disguise. Number 16. She-Wolf of London, 1946. Young Phyllis Allenby believes the women in her family may carry an ancient curse. According to the legend, an Allenby woman once transformed into a wolf-like killer. When attacks begin occurring in a London park near her home, Phyllis becomes terrified that she is responsible. She wakes after troubled nights with confused memories, muddy shoes, and signs that appear to connect her to the crimes. Rather than seek help, she isolates herself from her fiancé, believing that marriage would place him in danger. The foggy park sequences create the film's best atmosphere. A woman walks alone beneath the trees, hears something moving nearby, and sees a shadow before the attack. The creature remains unclear, allowing Phyllis's fear to shape what viewers imagine. Unlike many werewolf films, the story focuses less on transformation makeup and more on psychological manipulation. Someone close to Phyllis understands the family legend and carefully arranges evidence to make her believe she becomes a monster while asleep. That plan works because Phyllis already fears her own bloodline. Each new attack strengthens the story she has been taught since childhood. June Lockhart gives the character a fragile sadness. Phyllis is not simply afraid of being caught. She is horrified by the thought that another personality may be using her body while she sleeps. The final explanation removes the supernatural curse, but it does not make the events less cruel. The supposed monster is part of a deliberate plan involving inheritance, control, and emotional torture. The film asks a disturbing question. How much false evidence would someone need before you began doubting your own memories? For Phyllis, the answer is frighteningly little. Number 15. Bedlam, 1946. In 18th century London, the wealthy treat Bethlem Royal Hospital as entertainment. Well-dressed visitors pay to stare at patients through bars, laughing at people who are frightened, confused, or unable to defend themselves. The institution is controlled by Master George Sims, played with smooth cruelty by Boris Karloff. Sims flatters powerful patrons while keeping the hospital filthy and violent. To him, the patients are not people. They are objects that can be punished, displayed, or used to protect his position. Nell Bowen, a spirited woman connected to the influential Lord Mortimer, initially jokes about the asylum. Her attitude changes after she sees its conditions and begins demanding reform. Sims responds by arranging to have Nell declared mentally unwell. She is stripped of her freedom and placed inside the institution she tried to expose. The scene in which Nell first enters the main ward is more disturbing than any traditional monster attack. Figures move through darkness, people cry from unseen corners, and Sims calmly explains that no one outside will believe anything she says now. Instead of surrendering, Nell treats the patients with respect. She organizes their living space and slowly earns their trust. That threatens Sims because kindness reveals that his cruelty was never necessary. The climax turns the asylum against its master. The patients place Sims on trial according to their own broken but strangely logical understanding of justice. Inspired partly by William Hogarth's images of Bedlam, the film finds horror in institutions rather than ghosts. Sims can destroy a person with paperwork, influence, and a false diagnosis. The locked doors are frightening because society gave him the keys. Number 14. Hangover Square, 1945. Composer George Harvey Bone is gentle, talented, and respected, until certain sounds trigger a complete change in his mind. When he hears harsh, dissonant noises, he enters a trance and later awakens with no memory of where he has been. During one of these episodes, a shopkeeper dies. George eventually begins suspecting the truth, but nightclub singer Netta Longden distracts and manipulates him. She encourages his romantic interest whenever she wants music, money, or attention, then turns toward another man. The tension grows from knowing that George may become dangerous before he recognizes the warning signs himself. Laird Crager plays him as a tragic figure rather than a simple killer. His face shows shame, confusion, and desperate hope that his missing hours have innocent explanations. The most famous sequence occurs during Guy Fawkes Night. After another blackout, George hides Netta's body inside a rolled carpet, places a mask over her face, and carries her toward a huge public bonfire. Crowds cheer around him, believing the disguised figure is part of the celebration. Bernard Herrmann's music makes the scene almost unbearable. The fire, festival noise, and pounding score transform a public celebration into the perfect hiding place. George later attempts to perform his long-awaited piano concerto while the building burns around him. Instead of escaping, he continues playing as flames move closer, and the music reaches its conclusion. That final image is both horrifying and strangely beautiful. George's greatest work and complete destruction arrive at the same moment. The film remains creepy because his monster is not always present. It waits behind a sound, ready to take control before George can cover his ears. Number 13. The Lodger, 1944. Fog covers Whitechapel while a killer targets women working in London's music halls. Into this frightened neighborhood arrives Mr. Slade, a quiet pathologist searching for a room. Robert and Ellen Bonting accept him as their lodger. Their niece Kitty, a successful stage performer, soon attracts Slade's attention. He behaves politely, yet his habits create suspicion. He remains awake at unusual hours, carries a black medical bag, and turns pictures of actresses toward the wall. Unlike a traditional mystery, the film does not spend much time hiding Slade's connection to the crimes. The suspense comes from watching the family slowly recognize the danger living upstairs. Laird Crager's performance is the film's greatest weapon. Slade speaks softly and appears wounded whenever anyone questions him. His sensitivity almost creates sympathy, but small changes in his expression reveal anger and obsession. One famous sequence follows Kitty during a performance while Slade watches from the audience. The stage lights, costumes, and applause make her visible to everyone, but his stare makes the theater feel private and threatening. Slade claims that women of the stage destroyed his brother, and he has turned grief into a mission of punishment. Kitty becomes his final and most important target. The climax moves through backstage corridors, rooftops, and fog-covered streets as police close in. Slade seems to disappear into the city that produced him. The London setting feels less like a location than a living maze. Gas lamps reveal only small circles of safety, and every figure emerging from the fog could be a policeman, an innocent stranger, or the lodger returning home before dawn. Number 12. The Picture of Dorian Gray, 1945. Young Dorian Gray possesses wealth, beauty, and the admiration of nearly everyone he meets. While artist Basil Hallward paints his portrait, the cynical Lord Henry Wotton convinces Dorian that youth and pleasure are the only things worth protecting. Dorian makes a wish that the portrait should grow old while he remains unchanged. The wish comes true. At first, the transformation is small. After Dorian cruelly rejects singer Sybil Vane, a slight alteration appears on the painted face. As his behavior becomes more selfish and destructive, the portrait grows increasingly hideous. Dorian hides it inside a locked room, covering it from view. Years pass, but his appearance remains exactly the same. Friends age while he continues looking like the young man Basil painted. The film's most famous moment arrives when the black and white image suddenly changes to color, revealing the corrupted portrait in shocking detail. Its decayed face and twisted hands show everything Dorian's real body has escaped. Another memorable scene places a swinging lamp above Dorian and Basil during a confrontation. Moving shadows cross the room as Basil finally sees what the painting has become. Dorian realizes that the artist now knows too much. Hurd Hatfield's stillness makes Dorian frightening. He rarely behaves like a traditional screen monster. His calm expression suggests that years of consequence-free cruelty have emptied him of ordinary feeling. The story becomes a nightmare about hidden evidence. Dorian can deceive society, mirrors, and even time, but he cannot silence the object recording his true nature. Every locked attic carries a similar fear. Perhaps someone has hidden the honest version of themselves upstairs. Number 11. Isle of the Dead, 1945. During the Balkan Wars, Greek General Nicholas Pharides visits a small island cemetery with American reporter Oliver Davis. They discover that the grave of the general's wife has been disturbed and emptied by local thieves. Before they can leave, several people on the island become ill. A doctor identifies the disease as septicemic plague and orders everyone to remain there under quarantine. The group takes shelter inside a house, but fear spreads faster than the illness. An elderly woman insists that one guest, Thea, is a vorvalaka, a supernatural creature believed to drain life from others. General Farades initially rejects superstition. As more people fall ill, however, his military logic gives way to paranoia. Boris Karloff shows the transformation slowly. The general's disciplined expression remains, but his decisions become increasingly shaped by terror. The most famous and disturbing section involves Mary, a woman with catalepsy who fears being buried alive. After she appears to die, she is placed inside a coffin. Viewers know her condition may only be temporary, turning every second near the grave into torture. When Mary awakens underground, panic destroys her mind. Her return to the house creates some of the film's strongest horror, as she moves through darkness, in a state between victim and threat. The island offers no escape. Boats cannot return until the quarantine ends, and everyone watches everyone else for signs of illness or supernatural attack. Whether the vorvalaka exists is almost irrelevant. Suspicion becomes its own creature, feeding on grief and isolation, until the survivors are more dangerous than the plague surrounding them. Number 10. The Beast with Five Fingers, 1946. Inside an old Italian mansion lives Francis Ingram, a disabled pianist, whose right hand still possesses remarkable strength and skill. His nurse Julie and strange secretary Hilary remain near him, while relatives wait for his fortune. After Ingram dies, the will produces conflict. Then the piano begins playing in empty rooms. Soon witnesses claim that a severed hand is moving through the mansion. It crawls across tables, hides inside drawers, and attacks people connected to the inheritance. Because it wears Ingram's ring, everyone recognizes exactly whose hand it appears to be. The famous library sequence remains wonderfully creepy. Hilary, played by Peter Lorre, searches among shelves while the hand moves independently nearby. He tries to trap it inside a container, but fingers curl around the edge and escape. Hilary's increasing panic makes the impossible creature convincing. He is a scholar who wants logical answers, yet the hand appears whenever his confidence begins returning. The story eventually offers an explanation involving deception and psychological instability. However, the special effects are so effective that the rational answer never completely erases what viewers saw. A hand is normally harmless without a body. That familiar shape becomes deeply unnatural when it moves with purpose, chooses hiding places, and seems to remember personal grudges. The mansion's other residents become afraid to touch curtains, open boxes, or reach beneath furniture. Even the piano keys feel dangerous because something may be waiting below them. After watching, your own hand resting on the sofa can look strange for a second, especially when the room is dark enough to hide the wrist. Number 9. The Spiral Staircase, 1946. A killer is targeting women with physical disabilities during a violent storm in turn-of-the-century New England. Inside an isolated mansion works Helen, a young woman who lost the ability to speak after witnessing a traumatic death. Helen cares for the bedridden Mrs. Warren, while other members of the household move through the enormous house. As the storm cuts them off from help, Mrs. Warren becomes convinced Helen will be the killer's next victim. The murderer's presence is shown through one of the film's most famous images, a close view of a watching eye hidden inside darkness. When the killer imagines Helen, he sees her without a mouth, turning her silence into the quality that marks her for attack. Every part of the mansion becomes threatening. Wind opens doors, lights fail, footsteps cross the upper floor, and the spiral staircase connects Helen to rooms she cannot safely investigate. When a woman is found dead in the basement, Helen realizes the killer is already inside the house. She cannot telephone for help because she cannot speak. That simple problem creates unbearable suspense. The object that should connect her to safety becomes useless in her hands. Dorothy McGuire communicates Helen's fear through movement and expression. She must warn others, protect Mrs. Warren, and survive without the scream that horror heroines normally use to summon help. The killer's identity eventually emerges from the household's buried resentments and family relationships. Yet the revelation matters less than the long wait before it. During the climax, Helen attempts to force her voice back while the murderer approaches. The storm is loud enough to cover his movements, and the staircase seems to stretch between them. Few films have made silence feel so physically dangerous. Number 8. The Leopard Man, 1943. A publicity stunt begins the nightmare. Nightclub performer Kiki Walker enters a crowded room leading a black leopard on a leash, hoping the animal will steal attention from rival dancer Clo-Clo. The leopard becomes frightened and escapes into the night. Soon a young girl named Teresa is sent by her mother to buy flour from a distant shop. She must cross dark streets and an empty riverbed while knowing the animal may be nearby. Her return home creates one of the most famous suspense sequences of 1940s horror. Teresa reaches the locked front door and begs her mother to let her inside. Something approaches from the darkness. The mother, still angry about the delay, hesitates. The attack remains mostly unseen. What appears beneath the door is enough. After another victim is discovered, people assume the escaped leopard is responsible. Jerry Manning, the man who planned the publicity stunt, begins noticing that the evidence does not always resemble an animal attack. The possibility emerges that a human killer is using the leopard as cover. That idea makes every character dangerous, because the creature may not be the only hunter moving through the town. Another haunting sequence follows Clo-Clo after a fortune teller repeatedly deals the card associated with death. She laughs at the warning, but grows nervous while walking alone through empty streets. Director Jacques Tourneur turns ordinary spaces into traps. A doorway, railway bridge, or patch of darkness becomes terrifying because the victim must cross it while the audience waits. The film understands that fear is often strongest before anything appears. It makes viewers study every shadow for an animal, then reveals that human beings are better at hiding. Number 7. The Seventh Victim, 1943. Young Mary Gibson leaves her boarding school after learning that payments from her older sister Jacqueline have suddenly stopped. She travels to New York and discovers that Jacqueline has disappeared, sold her cosmetics business, and left behind almost no explanation. Mary's search leads through Greenwich Village, where ordinary cafes, apartments, and offices hide a secret group devoted to dark rituals. These people do not live in castles or wear theatrical robes. They are polite, educated citizens who meet quietly behind respectable doors. The creepiest discovery comes when Mary enters a room Jacqueline rented before vanishing. Inside, there is almost nothing except a chair and a hanging noose. The room suggests that Jacqueline has been preparing for death long before anyone began searching for her. Jacqueline once belonged to the secret society, but later revealed its existence. The members remind her that betrayal has a price, yet they prefer psychological pressure over open violence. Their calm voices make the threat even colder. A famous sequence follows Jacqueline through empty nighttime streets, while a shadowy figure trails her beneath the lamps. She runs, hides, and listens, but the city suddenly feels deserted. The ending offers little comfort. Mary finds her sister, but Jacqueline no longer believes rescue is possible. The film becomes frightening because evil appears organized, patient, and completely ordinary. It does not need to chase its victim when it has already convinced her that there is nowhere left to go. Number 6. The Body Snatcher, 1945. In 19th century Edinburgh, respected surgeon Dr. Wolfe Macfarlane trains medical students who need bodies for anatomical study. Legal supplies are limited, so he depends on cab driver John Gray to deliver fresh corpses after dark. At first, Gray claims that he only steals from graves. Soon, however, it becomes clear that he is willing to create new bodies whenever the cemetery cannot provide enough. Boris Karloff plays him with humor, intelligence, and quiet confidence. He understands that Macfarlane's career rests on crimes neither man can admit. A young student named Donald Fettis becomes involved while searching for a way to help a child who requires surgery. His good intentions pull him into the arrangement, proving how easily compassion can excuse terrible choices. The most haunting scene follows a blind street singer performing beneath a window at night. Gray's carriage approaches as her song continues. The film does not show what happens. Later, the same melody seems to come from inside his carriage, revealing the truth through sound alone. Another tense moment places Gray against a blackmailer who believes he can control him. Gray remains calm while the conversation becomes deadly. During the climax, Macfarlane drives through a storm with a covered body behind him. The corpse appears to move, and Gray's voice seems to rise from the darkness. The horror comes from compromise. Every character takes one small step for a noble reason, only to discover that John Gray has been waiting at the end of the road. Number 5. The Uninvited, 1944. Brother and sister Roderick and Pamela Fitzgerald discover an abandoned mansion overlooking the sea in Cornwall. Despite its neglected condition and unusually low price, they immediately fall in love with the place and buy it. Their excitement fades after the first nights. Unexplained sobbing travels through the house before dawn. Rooms become suddenly cold. A dog refuses to climb the staircase, and the scent of mimosa appears even though no flowers are nearby. The previous owner's granddaughter, Stella Meredith, feels connected to the mansion because her mother died there. Whenever Stella visits, the strange activity becomes more intense. One of the film's most memorable scenes comes when Roderick and Pamela follow the sound of a woman crying through empty rooms. The voice seems to move behind walls, remaining close but impossible to locate. Nothing visible appears, allowing the audience to imagine something worse. Stella's grandfather insists the house is dangerous and tries to keep her away. Meanwhile, Miss Holloway, who once cared for Stella's mother, describes the dead woman with suspicious devotion. As family secrets emerge, Roderick realizes that two spirits may be connected to the house. One appears protective, while the other seems determined to claim Stella. What makes the film effective is its certainty that the haunting is real. There is no servant pulling wires and no final explanation removing the supernatural. After watching, an empty staircase feels different. The darkness above it may be silent, but silence does not mean the house is unoccupied. Number 4. The Queen of Spades, 1949. Captain Herman Suverin is a poor army officer obsessed with wealth and status. He spends his nights watching other officers gamble, but refuses to risk his own limited money. Then he hears a story about an elderly countess who supposedly learned the secret of 3 unbeatable cards through a supernatural bargain. Herman becomes consumed by the idea. He gains access to the countess's home by pretending to court her young companion, Lizaveta. His romantic words are planned steps toward the old woman's private room. The mansion is filled with candles, heavy curtains, religious images, and long corridors. The sound of the countess's dress moving through the house becomes ghostly before anything supernatural happens. Herman confronts her at night and demands the secret. When she refuses, he threatens her, and the shock causes her death. That should end the mystery, but the countess returns. One of the film's creepiest moments uses sound instead of a visible effect. Herman hears the rustling of her dress approaching through darkness before anyone appears. The ghost reveals the 3 cards, but Herman ignores the warning attached to them. At the gambling table, his confidence turns to terror when the final card appears to change into the countess's mocking face. The story follows obsession, eating away at reason. Herman begins as a controlled outsider and ends staring at cards as if they are alive. Its warning is simple. When a ghost gives you the secret you demanded, never assume she has forgiven how you obtained it. Number 3. I Walked with a Zombie, 1943. Betsy Connell travels to the Caribbean island of St. Sebastian to care for Jessica Holland, the wife of plantation owner Paul Holland. Jessica can walk and follow simple instructions, but she appears to possess no independent mind. Doctors describe her condition as illness. The island's residents offer another explanation. Jessica has become a zombie. Betsy develops feelings for Paul and decides to help restore his wife, though success may end her own hopes. When medical treatment fails, she agrees to take Jessica to a spiritual ceremony. Their nighttime walk through the sugarcane fields is the film's unforgettable centerpiece. Betsy leads the silent woman beneath a dark sky while drums sound in the distance. They pass strange objects hanging in the fields and encounter Carrie 4, standing motionless at a crossroads. Nothing attacks them, yet the scene remains terrifying because every object carries a meaning Betsy cannot understand. Jessica's pale dress moves through the darkness like the clothing of a ghost. At the ceremony, Betsy discovers connections between the Holland family and the island's beliefs. Jealousy, illness, colonial history, and spiritual fear blur together. A local singer reveals family secrets through music, while Paul's half-brother unravels as the truth about Jessica emerges. The film's zombie is not a decaying creature. Jessica is frightening because she looks physically present, while everything that made her human seems absent. The ending explains little. Science may account for part of her condition, but the distant drums suggest another truth beyond the plantation's understanding. Number 2. Cat People, 1942. Irena Dubrovna meets engineer Oliver Reed near the panther cage at a New York zoo. She is charming and lonely, but carries a terrifying belief from home. According to a legend from her village, certain women transform into panthers when overcome by passion, jealousy, or anger. Irena fears that physical intimacy will awaken the creature inside her. Oliver treats the story as superstition and marries her, believing patience and psychiatric treatment will solve the problem. Instead, his closeness to Alice Moore makes Irena's jealousy impossible to control. The famous bus sequence follows Alice walking alone at night. Irena's footsteps echo behind her, matching her pace. Alice turns but sees no one. The footsteps stop, silence stretches, and then a bus enters the frame with a sudden roar. An even creepier scene places Alice inside a swimming pool. Shadows move across the walls while animal sounds surround the room. Alice enters the water, knowing that anything approaching can see her before she sees it. A dark shape crosses the stairway, and growling echoes above the pool. When the lights return, Irena stands nearby, calm. Simone Simon makes Irena sympathetic enough that her fear becomes tragic. She does not want to hurt anyone, yet the more people dismiss her warning, the more isolated she becomes. The film rarely shows the creature clearly. That is why it remains effective. A visible monster would stay safely on the screen. The unseen panther escapes into whatever dark corner happens to be near the person watching. Number 1. Dead of Night, 1945. Architect Walter Craig arrives at a country house for a renovation. He has never visited the place, yet he recognizes the rooms and every guest inside. Craig explains that he has dreamed about this gathering before. In the dream, the ordinary afternoon gradually becomes a nightmare, but he cannot remember the ending. The guests share encounters with the unexplained. One man describes receiving a warning before a deadly accident. A woman recalls meeting the ghost of a child during a Christmas party. Another story involves a haunted mirror that slowly changes its owner's personality. The most frightening tale comes last. Dr. Van Straten describes ventriloquist Maxwell Frere and his dummy, Hugo. Maxwell believes Hugo has developed an independent personality. The dummy insults him, reveals private thoughts, and plans to leave for another performer. Michael Redgrave makes Maxwell's breakdown convincing. Hugo's wooden smile never changes, making every sentence colder. When the dummy moves or speaks without permission, viewers cannot decide whether it is alive or Maxwell has given it life. After the story's finish, Craig's forgotten dream returns. The house transforms into a nightmare filled with figures from the tales, carrying him toward an ending he cannot avoid. Then he wakes, receives a telephone call, and is invited to inspect a country house he has never visited. That circular ending makes the film impossible to escape. It does not finish the nightmare. It returns to the beginning, suggesting Craig has lived through the gathering before, and will continue living through it forever. Outro. How many of these forgotten nightmares had you already seen, and which one would you never watch alone after midnight? Tell us in the comments. If this countdown uncovered even one lost horror classic for you, please like the video, share it with another film fan, and subscribe to the channel. Keep the lights on, check the hallway, and remember, old movies' somnies hide the darkest shadows.